I said now, boy. Get back, boy. Stay together. Come back to you. Tell him.
On January 1st, 1863, U.S. President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that slaves in the states must be freed immediately. However, in Louisiana, there were still 350,000 slaves who were faced with a choice: wait for the Union Army to free them or seize their freedom themselves. This story begins in Louisiana, where we see many black slaves forced to work on cotton plantations. All the slaves worked without anyone daring to resist because the overseers there always carried whips and fierce dogs. Not far from the plantation in a hut, a slave named Peter, who loved his family very much, was seen caressing his wife's feet and cleaning them. There, Peter also gave his wife a little advice, telling her to always trust in God, because God is good and will always be on their side and will help them someday. Unfortunately, that belief could not hide them from reality, because soon after, two white men came and dragged Peter away because he had to return to work as a slave.
I said now, boy.
That day, Peter was not forced to work on the plantation but elsewhere, because John, the plantation owner, had sold Peter to the Confederate Army to be forced to work building railroad tracks. Seeing their father being taken away, his wife and children could only cry, but Peter told them to stay together because one day he would definitely return.
Stay together. Come back to you. Tell him.
In short, when approaching the project site, Peter saw so many slave heads stuck on spears. They were punished to warn the others so that they would not have the intention of running away. Not only were they used as forced labor, all the slaves were treated like animals. For example, Peter and the newly arrived slaves, they were chained and then led to the cage that was used as their new residence.
Make you yell again. We got her there.
There the slaves were really tortured to want to work on the big project, and if there was one who dared to escape, the first punishment that would be given was that his cheeks would be plastered with hot iron, then whipped overnight so that they would feel deterrent and not do the same thing. Seeing a slave named Ancelino grimacing in pain and looking helpless again made a man named Thomas even more frightened and felt like going home to meet his family. Realizing that Peter was trying to strengthen Thomas by saying that, think of it as just an ordinary job that Thomas used to do a lot, and believe that God will always protect us. Hearing advice from Peter, Thomas was quite calm, but Ancelino denied it, because according to him, if God exists and is always with them, why would God let them like this and not give any help at all? After being given a night's rest, the next day the slaves returned to their respective jobs. And because Peter had better energy than the others every time at lunchtime, the overseer often told Peter to come last. That day, when Peter was continuing his work while the others enjoyed lunch, he accidentally overheard Sergeant Howard's chat about President Abraham Lincoln declaring freedom for the slaves. The question is why only Howard knows, and yes, it's all because of the lack of communication media. Howard also only found out about it through one of the newspapers he accidentally read. Curious about the continuation of the conversation, Peter tried to listen more carefully, but at the same time, Thomas was scolded by Howard for bringing him dirty food. Feeling sorry for the teenager, Peter also tried to be a hero and finally made Howard furious until he almost shot him in the head.
A death wish.
Fortunately, at that moment, Fassel, a slave hunter, immediately whistled as if giving a warning to Howard to lower his weapon. If you look at it, maybe Fassel's warning was directed at Howard, but actually the warning was directed at Peter, so that he knew that Peter's life in this world was because of him. Now he was the master while Peter was just his dog, and it was later proven by Fassel, where when the morning arrived, instead of telling Peter to work, but he instead tied Peter like a dog. It was Fassel did to mentally drop Peter, who he felt was quite brave, but instead of being submissive, it turned out that this actually made Peter even bolder and began to think of his escape plan. The plan then, Peter told the others, where he said if they didn't want to die here, then they had to escape through the swamps for 5 days until they reached Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge itself was a gathering place for Union soldiers who could save them from slavery. After finishing his lunch, Peter and the others returned to continue the torturous work. Even so torturous that one of the slaves died of exhaustion, and Peter was assigned to put the slave's corpse into a mass grave. For Peter, this is already common, so he looks so unafraid to get rid of the slave's corpse. Then when the grave will be closed, Peter starts sprinkling lime, which is useful for removing the stench, but that's when he realizes that this is the right time to escape. Successfully attacking Howard and other overseers, Peter quickly took Howard's dagger and ran away from there. It turned out that what he did provoked the other slaves to escape as well, and chaos ensued. After escaping with 3 other slaves, Peter tried to find a swamp that could take them to Baton Rouge, and not wanting to be caught by Confederate soldiers, Peter, Anselino, and Garden ventured through a swamp full of crocodile, while Thomas, who was afraid, stopped until Fassel's dogs pounced on him from behind. After being pounced until he bled profusely, Fassel came with others and told his dogs to stop. Here, Fassel tried to give Thomas a chance to live, but Thomas had to tell where Peter and the others had escaped. At first, Thomas hesitated to say, but because Fassel promised to free, Thomas was forced to tell all of Peter's plans. After knowing that Fassel also invited Thomas to leave, but not to leave to save himself, but to leave this world. Feeling that Fassel already knew where they were going, halfway through, Peter told the others to split up so that their whereabouts would not be easily traced. Like the others, Peter himself tried to keep running to find the swamp that led to Baton Rouge, and even though his leg was injured, he continued to walk through the forest carefully until he found a house. Because it was unlikely that the residents of the house would welcome him well, Peter quietly sneaked into the yard and approached a well to get water that he could drink. After that, when it felt safe enough, Peter ran back to get the clothesline and also potatoes as his provisions later. Unluckily, when Peter did this, the daughter of the owner of the house managed to see him. She shouted and then rang the warning bell to make Fassel finally find out where Peter went. Not having time to escape, especially since his leg was now injured, Peter bandaged his leg using the cloth he stole and then took it off again because it would be used to trick his dog Fassel's scent. Here, Peter took a long time, but fortunately, Fassel was not suspicious because Fassel thought Peter would not be able to hide in a swamp full of crocodiles. After Fassel and his men went to another place, Peter was finally able to get out of the hideout, but suddenly he was attacked by a hungry crocodile. In the end, the result of the fight, Peter got a lot on his body, but immediately he tried to treat the wound on a tree while hoping he was still given a chance to survive. The next day, it turned out that Fassel and the others returned to the swamp where Peter was hiding yesterday. They deliberately came there to confirm Peter's whereabouts again, but when they arrived at the place, they only found the carcass of a crocodile, which when split open its stomach, there was nothing, even though they hoped Peter's body was there. Failing to get Peter, Fassel made the crocodile his dinner. While enjoying the reptile's meat and resting, Fassel told me that when he was a child, he was taken care of by a Negro girl because his parents were busy working. Fassel claimed that he and the girl were good friends, but one night he asked his father for permission to invite the girl to dinner at his house. But it turned out that his father refused for unreasonable reasons, and the father said that the girl at first did eat their food, but then the Negroes would take their jobs and steal their land. Still not understanding his father's words, Fassel was determined to smuggle food for the girl, but unfortunately, the father found out about it. The father then invited the girl to eat together, but after that, the father stabbed her and then left the girl's body rotting in the garden to die. Although Fassel is now working to enslave the Negroes, he thinks that the Negroes who are considered by them are stupid people are not, and maybe one day they will be able to take revenge on the white people who have oppressed them. On the next day of escape, Peter covered his body with mud to avoid insect bites. He also used a wooden stick to help him walk, and because of the wounds and hunger, Peter began to have difficulty walking. After returning to continue his journey while keeping an eye on the surroundings, Peter accidentally found a hut belonging to a crocodile hunter. Seeing that the hut was empty and had not been abandoned for a long time, he immediately went there to get drinking water. He also heated his dagger to then attach it to his wound to prevent infection, and by chance, Peter also saw a beehive on a tree. Feeling that his stomach needed to be filled with food, Peter tried to take the honey, and he brought smoke from the coal to repel the bees, and then took a little honey. Unfortunately, after that was done, he had to immediately continue his escape using an abandoned boat because now Fassel had managed to see the smoke he made. While Peter was still trying to find a way home, At a cotton plantation, his wife named Dodienne was told by Captain Harley that in the near future she would be taken by Fabian, where Dodienne had been sold to become a slave in another place. Dodienne thought she would be leaving with the children, but her assumption was wrong, as she would be leaving alone without the children, and out there, she would also be married off to another man by Fabian, because he thought Peter would never return. Knowing that the mother will be sold, Betsy immediately cries and invites the mother to run away. But Dodienne refuses because she knows the consequences if they run away later. But that does not mean that Dodienne is silent. Not wanting to be separated from the children, Dodienne tells Betsy to meet again in the transport room, and she asks Betsy to help her cut her hand because this is the only way she won't be sold. Meanwhile, in the swamps, to speed up his pace, Peter decided to get off the boat and continue the journey on foot. Then on the way, it turned out that he met Anselino again. Because he also found 2 onions earlier, Peter also told Anselino to smear his body with the onions so that his dog Fossil's smell was disturbed. But Anselino, who thought this was a waste, chose to run away and hide in a tree, while Peter hid behind the roots of the tree. It turns out that what Peter did was right because the onion really disturbed Fossil's dog's smell, so that he was not found, and it was Anselino who was caught.
I am not a slave!
The goddamn gun on me! Get your ass down here!
I am a man.
Seeing that one of his slaves had been found, Fossil immediately shot Anselino until he fell from the tree. Here, Anselino was not immediately killed by Fossil because Fossil wanted to find out where the others were. But because Anselino did not want to say anything, Fossil finally took his final action, namely beheading him. In short, after the surroundings were safe, Peter began to leave to continue his journey towards Baton Rouge. After quite a long way, he walked. Peter found a burning house and saw so many bodies lying everywhere. Because he wanted to know what had just happened, Peter also ventured to enter the house. There he took the remaining drinks and food and then continued to check other places, and after checking even deeper on the 2nd floor, he found a dying Negro girl. When Peter was going to try to help her, it turned out that the girl could not survive anymore until finally died. When Peter was accompanying the departure of the girl, suddenly Fossil's men came to catch him. Not wanting to be caught so easily, Peter tried to fight back and grab their weapons. He also killed the others and then immediately fled from the place.
Now walk.
Soon Fossil also arrived at the place, and because he knew Peter had not run far from there, he immediately sent his pet dog to track back. Fortunately, Peter managed to kill the dog, so that it made it even more difficult for Fossil to catch Peter. In short, when morning arrived, Peter arrived at the site of the former war between the rebels and the Union Army. Because the safest point was in sight, Peter was running again and trying to forget about fatigue and hunger. But at the same time, Fossil managed to find him and forced Peter to kneel down and beg for forgiveness. But suddenly, and yes, Fossil was shot first by Captain Andrew of the Union Army. Now Peter was safe, and he was immediately given drinking water and then taken to the Baton Rouge refugee camp to get treatment because his leg was badly infected. Unfortunately, Peter's survival did not mean he could immediately return to his family. After his condition recovered, Peter had to give his bio to the officer. Then he got 2 choices to work on a government plantation or join the Union Army to eradicate the rebels who were still on the loose. Feeling that the second choice was the most appropriate, Peter agreed to join. When he was about to register as a new soldier, he unexpectedly met Garden again, and Peter was very grateful because Garden came safely. Then Peter immediately took the cue to take the uniform, but before that, Peter was invited by 2 photographers who wanted to take pictures, and this was done so that everyone out there knew what the results of slavery looked like. In short, after officially becoming a Union soldier, Peter was invited by Captain Andrew to hear directions from their superiors. Here the troops were given the task of taking control of the Port Hudson area, the area that used to be a place of torture for Peter. Knowing that Peter was a former slave in that place, the general thought Peter would be afraid to join the war, but in fact he was not. The courage in Peter was still burning, as if he wanted to show that he would never be afraid to fight his enemies and take freedom. The next day, Captain Andrew also brought a platoon to fight in the Port Hudson area, and before entering the battlefield, the captain gave a warning to his troops to never retreat again, because this war was not for money, but for freedom.
We will take freedom!
When the fierce war took place, many Union soldiers died because the weapons used by the enemy were far more sophisticated. Even when a cannonball was dropped, Peter was thrown until he fainted. Fortunately, Peter was still okay. He then immediately got up and returned to battle. Unfortunately, when Peter joined, Captain Andrew, who managed to bring his troops into close combat, was killed by enemy fire. Command was now taken over by Peter, and Peter, who now realized that the cannon was the source of their problems, immediately called on his troops to continue to run forward and damage the cannon so that they could win the battle. After the victory of the Union Army over the war, the troops went on a mission to free slavery on the cotton plantation, and upon arrival, the soldiers immediately searched and also executed John as the owner of the plantation. But when the statement of freedom was delivered to everyone there, Peter did not find his family until he thought that his family was dead. In the midst of people's happiness, Peter could only surrender and felt very desperate. But when Peter began to look around again, he finally managed to find his wife and children who were still in good condition. The original photo of Peter spread around the world and united everyone against slavery. Then, as a result of the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, more than 400,000 black people ran to freedom, and on June 19, 1865, nearly 4 million enslaved people were recognized as free, and the movie was finished.